Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. As the first round of presidential elections looms large on the horizon, Poland's domestic political debate has recently been focused on the status of the judiciary and the rule of law. The current government has pinned the blame for a massive penalty slapped on Poland by the EU. Given that the previous administration was involved, they basically say it was the previous administration's fault, especially the controversial judicial reform. Meanwhile, the country's top constitutional court chief, nominated by the previous government, fired back with accusations of a creeping coup d'etat. So how does this latest series of political broadsides affect the state of the judicial system as a whole? Joining us now is Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration, University of Warsaw. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to come back.
So first of all, this massive penalty, over 300 million euros. Is it possible to say with any degree of clarity who's responsible for this?
Well, we are paying the price, we as Poland are paying the price for the 8 years of the previous government and the unconstitutional reforms that have been introduced by the previous government. And unfortunately, during the course of last year, it was not possible to entirely reverse those unconstitutional movements, reforms. Therefore, still the government is subject to proceedings of the European Court, of the European Union Court, and therefore also the fines are imposed on the Polish government.
So specifically, this was the judicial reform. It was originally, according to the previous government, intended to streamline the function of the judiciary and make the process of selection more fair and open. Did it actually achieve this objective, regardless of the fines, which are a separate matter?
Well, for the time being, it is still challenging to describe this in a perspective of a rule of law, because all these gradually introduced reforms by the previous government have not been reversed. So it does take time, and the main obstacle is still the president, who is not willing to sign the Act of Parliament, which would legally and constitutionally reverse those Acts of Parliament that have been introduced during the previous government.
So that's the reason for the current deadlock. But can the previous government say, well, we did get this penalty, but, for example, the courts are functioning way faster than they were functioning before, or they are way more efficient? Did this reform achieve any sort of tangible benefit for the everyday person on the street?
They have not. In fact, actually, the length of the proceedings have actually increased, meaning that the courts are not more effective, they are not more efficient. They are proceeding in an even longer way. And currently, because there is now a problem which judges are legally appointed and which not, it causes additional legal challenges and problems for the people who are seeking justice, because currently they do not have 100%, they are not sure if the judge is legally appointed or not, which creates additional problems and chaos in the judiciary.
How to solve this issue? Because it sounds like we have two parallel legal systems emerging, which of course is not sustainable in the long run. What political decision would be necessary in order to make sure that this uncertainty disappears?
The challenge ahead of the government, which is in place from the very beginning of the process, is that how to reintroduce the rule of law with legal means, so not breaking the rule of law, meaning that we need to use the parliamentary path, the legislative path, which is stopped currently by the president, who is supporting of the previous government, and he's also coming from the Law and Justice Party, meaning that for the time being it is still very problematic to restore the rule of law and to restore all these, let's say, fundamental principles that should be in place in the rule of law system.
And theoretically, dealing with this duality, do you think it's likely to continue? Like the next government takes over, says, these judges were appointed unconstitutionally, so we're not respecting the judgments. Or would there be a moment when someone has to say, okay, we need to do something with it. We no longer can discuss the question of appointments, because people going to court will be asking themselves the question, even if I get the dispute resolved in court, will someone challenge it on the grounds of illegality of appointment of the given judge?
That is precisely the problem, that citizens can lack trust to the judicial system, to the government, and this is a very dangerous situation in a democratic country, especially with all these external threats that we are currently facing. Meaning that the government would need to really focus on explaining to the people the problems, the challenges, and the path that is designed to try to eradicate those problems.
But about these judges, should the government insist on basically removing them or shortening the term, or should they, well, basically acquiesce, saying, okay, so we understand that there were irregularities, but for the sake of legal order, we're going to keep these appointments, because doing otherwise would only exacerbate the chaos?
That's a very
difficult question, isn't it?
That's a very complicated question indeed. And also the government requested an opinion from the Venice Commission, which is advisory body consisting of lawyers, legal specialists who are supposed to advise to the governments in cases of such complicated aspects. And again, even this opinion is not really entirely clear to the government, because on one hand, the government is obliged to reform the judicial system as soon as possible, and of course also address this problem of the judges, of the neo-judges. But on the other hand, they need to do it effectively and in a legal way. So sometimes these procedures also take time, because if you would just remove all these judges from the office, that would also be breaking the fundamental principles of the rule of law. So we are a little bit in a problematic situation, we can say, because on one hand we need to be efficient and fast, but on the other hand we need to respect the legal principles.
So it's a bit of a conundrum, and on the top of that there are accusations of a creeping coup d'etat. Now, how do we define a coup d'etat in general?
Well, these accusations are of course ridiculous, and we need to say that very clearly, because these accusations have been put forward by the current head of the Constitutional Tribunal, but Mr. Święczkowski, this is his name. He is the former close colleague of Mr. Zbigniew Ziobro, who was the Minister of Justice in the previous government, and he's very closely linked to the Law and Justice political party. He was a very active politician in this party as well, meaning that we would need to really ask about the intentions of this person to actually put forward those kind of accusations. Of course, those accusations are completely false. There is not such a thing happening. Actually, if we discuss breaking the law, breaking the constitution, or creeping coup d'etat, we could ask about the previous government's activities in this regard, because they have been introducing unconstitutional steps, also steps not taking into consideration European law and the rule of law principles, and it put our country in a very serious position, which we are currently paying the price for, as we just discussed.
Wouldn't using the term like a creeping coup d'etat be a sort of like a blanket accusation that you can level against any irregularities? Because by definition, a coup is directed against a democratically elected government by the usurping power, like of the military. You could have a self-coup, arguably like you had in South Korea. But again, is this what we're experiencing? Are there any indications that anyone wants to subvert the functioning of the legislative or the executive at this stage?
This is why precisely I very bluntly stated that this accusation is ridiculous, because of course coup d'etat means that we are trying to take power against a democratically elected government. And who is accused of coup d'etat? Democratically elected government. So it doesn't hold any, let's say, serious aspect in this regard. So basically, I think that the intention is to divide the society, to introduce also additional fears in the society, to induce this kind of fears, which is very dangerous. And it needs to be really clearly named what is happening in our country, that we have democratically elected government who is introducing legal reforms, also using legal instruments, legal means, and actually the, let's say, slow speed that sometimes the government is accused of is resulting from that we cannot sometimes take the shortcut and introduce some necessary reforms, but without sticking to the procedure. And this is precisely what is happening. So accusations of coup d'etat are absolutely out of place and ridiculous.
Professor Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And I'm Ina Szerwiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and features.